Pablo Escobar. The story of a real cartel. The man known in the pages of history as Pablo Escobar was actually born on December 1st, 1949 in Rio Negro, Colombia, into a family living an ordinary life. His father Abel was a poor farmer who worked as a laborer and day worker on other people's fields, trying to raise 7 children. His mother, Hermilda, was both taking care of her children and working as an elementary school teacher. Pablo was the third of these 7 children. The family soon moved to Medellin, but here we need to stop and understand the situation. We need to look at the structure of Medellin during that period, because this is very important for understanding every detail. This city, which had a population of only 60,000 in 1905, had surpassed 300,000 by the time Pablo was born, an extraordinarily growing population. By the time Pablo turned 20, it had exceeded 1 million. So we're talking about a city growing at an incredible pace, with poverty and desperation around every corner, a city where opportunities were bubbling up for opportunists. Serious trouble at a young age. Pablo had already become involved with gangs by the age of 14. This led to his expulsion from school and soon to fighting, which he ultimately lost. But he didn't give up. In his next fight, he shot his opponent in the leg and got his first taste of prison. Still in his youth, he was stealing gravestones, sanding them down and reselling them, and was running a fake diploma scheme. Of course, it's hard to say how accurate these are, but Escobar's legend had started very early. Colombia's dark underside. Now, I need to open a parenthesis here, because to understand Pablo, we need to look at Colombia in its past state. The country was embroiled in an ongoing political conflict between liberals and conservatives, with the meddling of the United States, as always. Under the Monroe Doctrine, it considered the entire American continent its own backyard. By keeping conservative politicians on the side of American companies, they were impoverishing the people. In 1948, they had set everything ablaze with a spark by assassinating the populist leader Jorge Eliezer Gaitan. Then they had initiated the period of La Violencia, the age of violence, during which more than 200,000 people were eliminated over a decade. And after so much bloodshed, both sides reconciled and began taking turns in power. But this could not end the fundamental problems. In 1964, the FARC emerged, and the Civil War spread to rural areas. On top of all these events, add this. In the 1960s and 70s, demand for drugs had exploded in the United States. First marijuana, then cocaine. Colombia's geography was perfectly suited for the coca plant. In other words, the stage was set. It was just waiting for its actors. It was Pablo Escobar who stepped onto that stage. By 17, he had already gotten involved in gang activities, smuggling contraband cigarettes, car theft, kidnapping people, and collecting ransoms. Through these activities, he had partnered with Oscar Benel Aguirre. He wanted fast money and was ready to try every way to get it. In the early 1970s, he moved into the marijuana smuggling he had been waiting for. Moving from there to cocaine was simply a matter of changing cargo. During this period, he fell in love with Maria Victoria Henao. The girl was still young. Maria's mother, knowing Escobar well enough, honestly told her daughter, "If you choose this man, you'll spend your life going to prison visits." Maria didn't care what her mother said. They married in 1976. Pablo was 26 and Maria was only 15. They had 2 children, Juan and Manuela. Entry into cocaine. In the mid-1970s, another smuggler named Griselda Blanco got him into the cocaine business. The timing was perfect. Disco culture had exploded in the United States. New York and Miami nights didn't pass without cocaine. Demand had reached enormous proportions. Pablo initially transported coca paste to processing facilities. In a sense, we could call it cargo duty. But he soon cut out the middlemen and built his own team to transport processed cocaine directly to the United States. Without even realizing it, he had laid the foundations of the Medellin cartel. Almost ended before it began. In May 1976, he was caught red-handed with 18 kilograms of coca paste. The first thing he tried was bribery, but it didn't work. Then he tried to eliminate the people who had arrested him, and this worked. The officials, fearing their turn would come, dropped the case and Pablo went free. And this approach was actually the summary of the next 15 years. He would not hesitate to use every form of violence to get what he wanted. The rise of the cartel. In the late 1970s, two partners who had left Danbury prison entered the scene: German-Colombian Carlos Lader and American George Young. These two had met in prison and had planned how to conduct cocaine trafficking. In 1978, Lader began purchasing Norman Fuss's Cay Island in the Bahamas, intimidating some and outright killing others. He turned the island into a fully personal operations base. Runways and warehouses were built. More than 300 kilograms of cocaine passed through there per day. Later became so wealthy from this that he offered to pay Colombia's national debt twice. Of course, this was solely to escape prosecution. Another important name was Barry Seal. He was a pilot from Louisiana. He flew small planes under radar, dropping cocaine over Louisiana via the Gulf of Mexico, until 1983, when he fell into the DEA's hands. He became an informant and talked about Escobar. When Escobar learned of the situation, he had Seal eliminated in 1986. Hacienda Nápoles, the peak of madness. With all this money, Pablo decided to build himself a more secure place. He purchased 20 square kilometers of land 150 kilometers east of Medellin. He had Hacienda Nápoles built there. What wasn't there? A Spanish colonial-style mansion, a sculpture park, a zoo housing zebras, hippos, elephants, giraffes, and ostriches, a kart racing track, a bullfighting arena. He was known for his particular fondness for hippos. He brought so many that wild hippo herds still roam Colombia today. He also had a large pink mansion registered in his name in Miami Beach. At that time, since he wasn't yet a famous drug lord, nobody asked how it was acquired. The U.S. government later seized it, of course. The money problem. Money as big as a giant. At the cartel's peak, their daily revenue was $70 million. $25 billion annually. Worth over $70 billion in today's money. There was so much money they couldn't finish it. Laundering it was itself a major problem. They were buying gold and melting it down, washing it through Panama. Even this wasn't enough. In the end, they stuffed it into the walls of properties, under floors, into hidden compartments. In short, everywhere they could find. Dozens of millions of dollars were hidden in a secret compartment beneath a house with a retractable jacuzzi. A poor family was settled in that house. The reason being so that it wouldn't be understood where the money was. They had no idea about the compartment. the only condition being that they leave the house when the money was being taken in or out. In 2020, Pablo's nephew Nicolas found $18 million inside a wall. Such discoveries are still ongoing today. The cartel spent $1,000 a week on rubber bands just to bind bundles of money. Even thinking about that is crazy, but truly the magnitude of the money seemed to have no end. 10% of the money was lost without being spent. The fear of extradition and the Robin Hood image. His greatest nightmare was being extradited to the United States. In 1979, Colombia had signed an extradition treaty with the United States. In 1982, this law went into effect. He was well aware that if he went to prison in Colombia, he could get out with bribery or serve comfortably. But if you went to the United States, you'd wait for death in a maximum security prison for life. He developed two paths against this. First, terror, targeting politicians, judges, and police. Second, winning the people. He distributed money in Medellin streets, built stadiums and parks, opened the zoo for free, repaired roads. Every Christmas he toured poor neighborhoods dressed as Santa Claus and met their needs. In addition, he poured money into Atlético Nacional Football Club. The club won the Copa Libertadores in 1989, for the first time in Colombia's history. People loved him because the state had abandoned them, and Pablo was giving money. He had become a ray of hope for them. Entering politics. Was it wise? In 1982, he became a congressional candidate from the Liberal Party. He built his campaign around opposing the extradition treaty, since this was his greatest fear. Those who criticized were silenced, one with a bullet. He ultimately won the election. But this move backfired. Now everyone's eyes were on him. Conservative President Betancourt acted. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla became Justice Minister and went after Escobar. El Espectador newspaper put his 1976 arrest on the front page. On top of that, the Virginia Vallejo scandal broke out. His relationship with a well-known TV presenter was exposed. His wife Maria kicked him out of the house. On January 20th, 1984, he resigned, but he was very angry and made it known. Declaration of war. 3 months after the resignation, on April 30th, 1984, a Yamaha motorcycle on the streets of Bogota pulled up beside Justice Minister Bonilla's vehicle. The person in the back drew a Uzi. He killed the minister right there on the spot. This was Escobar's open declaration of war on the government. To avoid being caught for what he had done, Pablo fled first to Panama with his family, then to Nicaragua. When he returned, he chose a more aggressive path. He collaborated with the M19 guerrillas. On November 6, 1985, more than 30 M19 fighters stormed the Palace of Justice in Bogota. They took more than 300 people hostage. The majority of the Supreme Court judges included among these hostages. The demand: cancel the extradition treaty. Put Betancourt on trial. The following day, the army launched a rescue operation on the building. About 100 people died, nearly all of the M19 fighters, and half of the Supreme Court judges. There was also an unexpected bonus for Escobar. Evidence concerning drug traffickers went up in flames. Was it intentional or coincidental? Still debated. The peak and the blood. In the mid and late 1980s, the cartel was at the zenith of its rise. At the same time, open war had begun with the Cali cartel. Mutual killings, assassinations, bombs. In 1988, a bomb exploded in front of Escobar's house. and Medellin had now become the most dangerous place in the world. In 1991 alone, 7,237 murders in this city, 18 murders per day. 266 out of every 100,000 people were being killed. Across Colombia in 1991, more than 25,000 violence-related deaths occurred. In 1992, this number exceeded 27,000. That's one person every 20 minutes. And Pablo wasn't satisfied with this either. In November 1989, Avianca Flight 203, a passenger plane departing from Bogota Airport, exploded in the air 5 minutes later, 110 dead. The target was Cesar Gaviria Trujillo. He hadn't boarded the plane. 2 weeks later, half a ton of dynamite in front of the security department, 57 dead, more than 2,000 wounded. The sole reason being his obsession with clearing his own name somehow. He had his own prison built. Eventually, he was cornered. In 1991, he agreed to voluntarily surrender, but with one condition. He would build his own prison and complete his sentence there. La Catedral was built on a hilltop overlooking Medellin. Inside were a football pitch, a jacuzzi, a waterfall-decorated bar, a private telephone line, a telescope. It was a luxury mansion where he would sleep. It was quickly nicknamed Hotel Escobar. He continued to manage the cartel from there. He would stay for a total of 5 years and in return would not be extradited. In 1992, the government decided to transfer him to a real prison. Pablo learned of the decision made for him. He used the escape tunnel he had already had built during construction and walked out. The final chase, now both the government and the United States Special Forces, SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, and a revenge gang called Los Pepis were after him. The Cali cartel was also among his enemies. He was being hunted from all sides. In December 1992, they came very close to catching him. He had left the hideout hours before. On December 2nd, 1993, his location was detected by tracking a cell phone signal. He was hiding in a house in the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellin. An 8-person team broke down the door. Pablo and his bodyguard went up to the roof and tried to escape, but then gunshots were heard. Seconds later, Pablo was lying on the roof. Bullets had struck his leg, his torso, and his ear. The bullet in his ear entered his skull. Whether he shot himself is not exactly known. His older brother Roberto said he always used to say that in such a situation he would shoot himself in the ear. It is not known for certain. One day after his birthday, on December 2nd, 1993, El Patron was gone. More than 25,000 people attended his funeral. So, who was this man? Really? In the years that followed, the Cali cartel grew, then was dismantled. In other words, everyone that left brought new cartels in its wake, then they too were dismantled. A new Mexican route for drugs came into play. The cycle continues. In 2016, a ceasefire was signed between the government and the FARC. Medellin transformed. Today it is a city cited as an example worldwide for its innovative transportation system. 30 years ago it was the capital of murders and assassinations. La Catedral was converted into a religious site by Benedictine monks in 2007. The hippos of Hacienda Napolgues are still roaming there. So who was Escobar really? The elder brother of the poor, or a ruthless killer who used them as a shield? He distributed money to the poor and helped them. But he already couldn't spend the vast majority of that money, And this same man did not hesitate to blow 110 innocent people up in a plane just to kill one enemy. His life in reality was always more complex than the legend. Do you have an opinion on this topic? What do you think he was really like? Please let's meet in the comments with your thoughts.